Hello, everyone. Mike the Beast here for another live video. And once again, I'm joined by Adam Miller, and we got a fun video planned for you guys tonight. Thank you for all who's tuning in, if any, or who's watching on the rewind. Adam, talk about why we got you here tonight, and then we'll go more in depth into it.
Yeah, sure, Mike. Thanks for having me again. It's
My pleasure.
always a pleasure. We're talking tonight about The Shade, which is a feature film, the debut feature film of Red King Cinema, a Boston-based production company, and the comic book that accompanies it, which is how I got into the mix with the anthology called The Shade Perceptions, which is a comic book anthology inspired by the film directly and in support of that. So
Awesome. And you've got a really cool concept. Before we get into the concept of the shade, talk about the people involved in the comic book's origins, and the process, that whole process of getting out into the comic book world.
yeah, so been kind of at this game for a little while now, sort of comics adjacent, I would call it. I don't know how basically like the people that aren't in comics, I'm in comics, and to people that are in comics, I'm out of comics. So I'm sort of in that weird middle ground where I've kind of drifted in and out of the field, wearing several different hats over the years. But how I came to be involved with this project was a friend of mine who I go years and years back with, who I've actually collaborated with on previous comic related projects, had done some work for Red King Cinema. And he reached out to me and asked if I knew anybody who would be interested in doing some concept illustrations for the scary monsters in the movie. I'm a bit of a dot connector by default, so he just, I get it's a call that I get fairly often, right? Not every day, but people I think I sort of cultivated a niche to where I think if you need something or a guy for a job, I might not be a bad person to call. So he gave me a buzz with that in mind. Hey, do you know anybody that would be interested in doing some concept illustrations for this movie that I'm working on? And my answer was, "You mean besides me?" And he kind of laughed. He was like, "Oh, you'd want to do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, man. Like draw monsters. Why wouldn't I?" And he was like, "Oh, you'd be our first choice. But I didn't know it'd be something you want to do, whatever." Um, so I was like, "Yeah, let's talk. Let's do it. Like, that sounds great." Like um, I was like I said, good friends with the person that reached out to me, and then an acquaintance of the producer, as he was good friends with the person that reached out. So again, this is all 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon and connections and such. So there were some icebreakers already in place, and basically I hopped on the phone with the producer, and I think he sent me a couple emails, and then after we had a back and forth, the producer, director, and they basically gave me the script. And so I had a flight to Florida for a different project with different clients, and I thought it was a great time to dive into the source material. So I read the script on the way down, and luckily I fell in love with the script. So can be a little tricky when you get involved in a project or take on a job that doesn't really speak to you. We all have to do it, right? We're all trying to put food in our plates, and that's part of being a commercial artist, right? Is that not every project is the coolest thing ever, right? Sometimes it's boring, sometimes it's a miss, but it's still making art for a living, and that's still kind of the dream. So in those scenarios, you try to find your in, right? You try to find like what's my entry point? How can I get attached? How can I get excited about this project? Luckily, on the shade, that was not the case. I immediately fell in love with the script. The central characters in the movie are brothers, and so I have a younger brother, and the relationship between the middle and youngest brother really resonated with me. And that was a very easy in for me. It was well written, well crafted, and it was very cool. So I was sort of then just energized and excited about it. So when I got back from Florida, I think they wanted 4 or 5, I think, concept designs, if I remember correctly. And I was just kind of excited about the material, so I ended up doing a few extra just because I was rolling on it. Um, and yeah, they saw the illustrations, they really liked it, they responded well to that batch of illustrations. They took me out to eat. They were nice to me. They paid me. It was, a very professional, fun. I felt, highly regarded and respected and all that jazz. But you don't always. It's wild to give this a go as a live, to make a living at it. You're just it's all there's always something. There's always some up and down. At least at my level, if you're uniquely talented or very established or really gifted, maybe these aren't problems you run into. But I think for most of us that are what I call good enough to give it a go, right? Like I'm not special. There's a million artists out there that can do a million things better than me. It's that I'm good enough to probably not sell insurance for a living, right? So like if you're just good enough to give it a go, you're going to have these ice cream headaches and these roller coasters and these ups and downs and these feasts and famines. It's kind of on a tangent now, but the point is that when you run into a company or a client or a collaborator that gets it, speaks the language, values you and values your contributions, it really hits and it really resonates. And that's what Red King did. They really prioritize the creatives that are involved with them and working with
Mhm.
them. And I felt it immediately. So
Awesome.
they were stoked on that first batch of concept art. And we just sort of tentatively agreed that we would do more. We would do another round, right? And it would be probably then more supporting characters, settings, that sort of thing. So the strength of my work is probably that it's unique. I bake a cake in a bit of a different way. And if you like the cake I bake, then great. The weakness is that it lacks some flexibility. So I'm not an excellent draftsman. I don't do some things typically well that some other artists do. My strengths are a little outside the box, I think, as far as like when I compose an image, when I build an image, I do it in a bit of a non-traditional way. So when it hits and people dig it. But I'm not always the best guy for every job, and I know that. So rather than get myself in trouble or provide an inferior product, what I try to do then is recommend somebody else who would be better for that. And so we got to the second batch of illustrations, and I was like, guys, I'm probably not your guy for this. Like, I work with photography, so all my illustrations have a photographic element. So we would have had to have like rallied the troops, went to sites, like driven to specific locations. I would have had to have met the supporting actors or at least got stand-ins. We've had just probably pretty elaborate photo shoots for me to pull off what I do. And I said, listen, I'm probably not the guy for you here. You're probably better off getting a digital artist or someone that does this, whole hog. And they respected that. They appreciated my honesty and candor. And then they went with a guy who did a hang up job. He did this fantastic second series of work, and it was great. It was the move. So ultimately, the concept work I did was basically boiled down to a fancy introduction to them. And through that correspondence and that chemistry and us working together, I think they started to sort of realize actually what I do, and got more connected with them and what they were trying to accomplish. And they, at the time, were trying to come up with some other ways to diversify the IP and broaden their their footprint, right? To actually present a more robust package of Red King and Shade options. And one of the options they were considering was a comic book, whether it was an adaptation or an anthology or whatever. Uh, and so that's when the ball really started rolling. They, because we were getting to know each other a little bit, they had were able to see the work that I do. They were able to get to know a little bit more about what my background is. As I said, I already had a connector there, and I had worked with that connector on extensive previous comic book projects. So he was advocating for me. And so when it came time for them to decide on, where they were going to put their energy, bandwidth, and resources, they decided comic book. So that basically is how I landed in this position, which is creative director for the Red King Publishing. So their publishing division, they brought me in to basically oversee. And so now, after you fast forward a bit, we decided we're going to put this comic book out in direct support of the film, which went through a bunch of iterations. And ultimately, we landed on the anthology format to encourage collaboration incorporate different creative teams to give their interpretation of the central themes of the movie. And that's how the book came to be.
Awesome. You mentioned creative teams. Talk about some of the other people you got to work on this project with in regards to the comic book.
Yeah, so one of the real thrills of this project was, we have these meetings at the Red King offices, and
Mhm.
it's pretty nuts and bolty. It's budget, it's distribution, it's um, building teams, deadlines, printing, on and on. So my first step was, and it really always is to build my team, right?
Yeah.
And so I have a guy named Keith McCleary, who's based in San Diego, who's my editor, and really is my only editor. He's the only editor I've ever worked with, and if I have any say, he'll be the only editor I ever work with if I'm the one deciding. He's awesome. We have a 20 plus year relationship working together. We're friends. He makes everything do better. I wanted him. And then production lead was John Cardinal, who is an absolute magician. He does literally everything. I've yet to stump him with anything visual or technical, and oftentimes he's already summoning the technical demons to perform the miracle I'm asking before I finish the sentence. So once I got those guys locked in and committed, I had a pretty good toolbox with me, and I felt pretty confident about bringing that team to battle. From then, we had a couple of different iterations of budgets, a couple of different iterations of scope, and ultimately, was able to put together a team that was a great mix of emerging and established, which I liked. To me, that's my sweet spot. I really like to give opportunities to emerging artists that I believe in, and sort of advocate for the artists to give them an opportunity to kind of get out in the world, and then kind of get above front of our skis a little bit, aim high, and try to pull in some bigger names with maybe bigger followings or a larger sort of market. And one of the cool things that happened, a real highlight for me, just from like a comic nerd fanboy perspective, when one of the early meetings, we were kicking ideas around, some of the larger names we were hoping to maybe get involved. And the first choice for them was a Jay Lee. They wanted to get a Jay Lee cover. Yeah, so, and they're not comic guys; they're movie guys.
Yeah.
Now, uh, you know, um, Tyler, who's the director, he's a comic guy, but he's first and foremost a movie guy.
Mhm.
And Dave, the producer, isn't a comic guy, but he knows enough to know, the big names. Of course, he knows Alex Ross and Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. The
Yeah.
household names. So they were both like, we'd love to get a Jay Lee cover, and so that sort of became my aspirational goal, my quest, right? And it was a pretty fun story of how we got there. Long story short, I didn't have to. I decided to drive uh, a day to meet him at a convention and approach him in person after some back and forth.
Awesome.
And he very gracefully agreed to do the cover. So that's a 30-second version of about a 45-minute long story. But it was really exciting when he agreed to join the fray. And then we had our cover artist, right? And and I am a super fan of Jay Lee. He's
Yeah.
probably on my Mount Rushmore. Personally, I his work is a big influence on me. So I love everything he does, and I've been a fan of his since the '90s. So
That's
when we
awesome.
got him, we were rolling. We were like, okay. So I put that feather in the cap, and then was super excited to work with him and have him represent the book. And then they wanted a variant cover, and that was exciting because they asked me to do the variant cover. I sort of tried to get out of it. I was uh, I was a little intimidated to do a cover and put it next to Jay Lee's. But after some words of encouragement from some trusted collaborators, and sort of just inherently knowing, like, yeah, of course I got to do it, right? This is what a chance this is. So I did the ratio variant cover. He did the A cover, and that was how we got our covers. And then from there, we just built the roster, right? And so that's a mix of people you've never heard of to people you've probably read many comic books from, right? Um, so Steve Jones, Hank Margin, Andy McDonald. We have Veronica Andy Fish. We have Koi Pham and I collaborated on a piece. Mike Doherty, John Cardinal. I mean, on and on. I think I sent you the contributor list. It's pretty extensive. So it was like it's about 6 short stories, each 8 pages long, and then a pretty robust gallery section in the back. So it's a pretty good mix of creators.
Awesome. So this is a one shot, correct?
Yeah. So the idea is that rather than a uh, direct adaptation, the comics we grew up with as kids, where the Batman movie would come out, and then you'd see the adaptation. This isn't a one-to-one adaptation. This is a anthology in the spirit of the movie. So we basically provided the creators with a 1 paragraph prompt and then encouraged them to interpret it how they saw fit.
Awesome.
So it's an interesting dynamic. So it's very liberating for the creative teams and makes a lot of work for me. So basically, the idea is we're really encouraging creative artistic freedom and interpretation, right? So we subtitled the Shade Anthology Perceptions, right? So the idea is that it's how each creative team is perceiving this 1 paragraph prompt, and then it's my job to make sure that it all funnels into a cohesive, relatable package, right? So ideally, say for example, I didn't have this problem, but in a hypothetical world, maybe somebody comes out of left field and wants to do a Western, and somebody wants to do a sci-fi, and somebody wants to do, something maybe too heavy R or X, right? Or something super political or whatever. Where you have to like kind of like don't do that and maybe do this and massage this here. So there was nothing way out of left field, but there was some massaging and some bending and pushing and pulling. But that's kind of what I bring to the table, right? That's what I like to do.
Yeah.
So we were able to get it funneled into a pretty cohesive package, and then you're just making a mixtape, right?
Mm.
You're finding out which song leads best into the next song, what's going to be the best experience for the reader, how many breadcrumbs do you leave along the way for a trail for the reveals, and that rinse repeat with the pinups. I love gallery sections in books. I'm a sucker for pinups. That's sort of my personal artistic background. Like I'm a kind of a single image communicator. I do mostly covers and pinups in my personal art career. So I really like to represent that side of the comic field. So that was a little easier because you're just like, hey, draw this cool thing based on this prompt. And there was no, it was like, that's cool. And of course, you're more likely to get a larger name for a pinup because it's a lighter workload, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a very busy, established illustrator, comic book artist, and I reach out to you and say, hey, here's our budget. We need 1 image for X amount of money. Does that fit? And they go yes or no, and they can and they can't. But generally speaking, a single image isn't going to be a huge time suck for them. And if they like the theme and they like who else is involved, it's an easier lift.
Sure.
Where getting a full-time comic artist to pull off a project they're on, to perhaps do a short story, or to luck out and get them to fill a gap, it's a little different. But we were able to get plenty of pros to get involved, so it was good. I'm at the end of the day, I'm really happy with how the mix turned out. I think there should be something in there for everybody, and I think it still does find a pretty good throughway of the theme of the book.
Awesome. And without giving away too much, because it is an anthology, and if you haven't already, maybe a little kind of teaser of what they can expect with some of the stories in the book, or would you
No,
prefer?
that's fine. Yeah, no, there. So one of the things I try to encourage, it's funny too. Some of the artists and writers involved, I've had very little experience with, and they were, friends of friends, acquaintances, someone I'd tripped across in work. One or two of them were actually like recommended by other artists, which is great. That's the essence of networking and collaborating and building. And then some of the artists I'm like close personal friends with. So it was interesting to collaborate with people that are either thousands of miles away or right in your own backyard, whether you mean that literally or in a relationship figuratively. So what I tried to encourage anybody who was tripping on anything, I really tried to get them to get personal. Yeah, I found like this is a very personal script. It's a personal movie. It's a slow burn. It's emotive. It's psychological. Um, this isn't what I would call a typical horror film. It's definitely more of like it kind of gets inside you and hangs around. And I think the tone that they were trying to set with the prompt was also the tone that I was trying to encourage with the creators. Is that really like if you're at a fork in the road in a story and you can click one way and make it more personal, or one way and make it more abstract. I really try to encourage everyone to go personal. So there's a story about love and loss. There's a story about parenthood. There's a story that hints at genocide and like geographic history. There's a story that's very uh, hometown, right? Very local, very everyman, with a sensational sort of like twist. So you're getting, a pretty good variety of stories. There's a pretty cool body horror one that I won't give away the punchline. Kind of makes your skin crawl a little. So we definitely hit a couple of different veins, I think. And it's not, the idea is that, okay, if you go to a Chinese food buffet, you like Chinese food, right? But you're going to pick a little something different off the menu. So if you like horror comics, you're at the Chinese restaurant, right? Like you already like what you're going to be eating. It's just the idea is you hope that like there's something enough for everybody within that context of the menu, essentially.
Awesome. And a lot of anthologies, there is almost what you would call like a through line, like
Mhm.
between each segment, there's an ongoing scenario, characters, whatnot. Does the shade contain that, or is it more from one of the scenarios to another?
Yeah, so each story is really pretty individual and pretty
Awesome.
freestanding, and it's that this manifestation of grief and inner turmoil and conflict that basically must be confronted,
Mhm.
right? And so there's always, it's sort of this idea of like there's, I don't want to see a demon inside of it. It's not really accurate. The movie really tackles a lot of mental health, right, and a lot of personal struggles and family dynamics. So basically, there's this manifestation of grief, right, of like hardship and heartache and internal conflict and internal turmoil and sort of mental duress. And there's a million terms for all of these things, right? And so we basically just funneled it into a nice, like concise paragraph and really let each team run wild.
Awesome.
So yes, there has to be some sort of malevolent force confronted, but that malevolent force can take shape in many different formats. And one story by Tony Donnelly, for example, it presents itself in the form of maybe a crow or a raven or a bird, but then something else as the story goes. So, his story deals with first and foremost probably the stresses and anxieties of daily life and career and hustle and bustle, and then it spins into something far more psychological. And so there is a different flavor, I think, for each story, but you shouldn't be button hooked by anything in there. I would think probably more likely um pleasantly surprised, rewarded, sort of like interested, like those are the sort of, I think, the how you would react to most of them if it's your cup of tea and if we're doing our job right.
Awesome. This has my interest. I definitely want to check this out. For people tuning in either on the Rewind live, where could they seek out the shade?
Yeah, so redkingcinema.com is where you can order the book online. And then in October, we just wrapped up a book tour, essentially. We had, I think, 9 stops in total. Spoke at a couple colleges, and then we were at a bunch of New England comic book shops.
Awesome.
And then this has been pretty cool too, is just sort of through that tour and getting out there and yapping a bit about the project. We were able to pick up a couple extra shops.
Nice.
So we planned it out to attack October as like cause spooky season, right?
Of course.
And then we got interest from another shop to come out, and then had sort of just a loose end that was tied up, and they reached back out, and we ended up. So this weekend we have 2 more signings. One is at Hub. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Hub was our last one. It's at Kamikaze in Somerville, Massachusetts, and then Paper Asylum in Beverly, Massachusetts on Sunday. So Saturday Kamikaze, Sunday Hub, and we're gonna do a Q&A at Kamikaze, and then portfolio reviews for
Oh, awesome.
establishing them. Yeah, so I like to do that too when I get the opportunity. I've been asked to do that a few times at like conventions and when I'm, I've done a couple panels but portfolio reviews are cool because it's a great way to give value back. And I don't mind. It's part of what I do for a living. I enjoy that part of it. And also it's a great way to scout, right? Like if someone has a little moxie and drives to Beverly and comes on Sunday and brings their portfolio and is really good, well, there's a really good chance I will use them,
Yeah.
So like come come to the event, buy a book, say hi, bring your artwork, blow my mind, and then maybe you'll get involved in the comic book. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
how these things go.
Awesome. And are you guys always with this tour going on? Are you continuously looking for new places to go, or do you have
Yeah.
like a date where you want to stop? Or
Yeah, no, so I don't, we kind of didn't get that far. Like, so these two dates were sort of bonus dates, and we're just, of
awesome.
course, like, why wouldn't we, right?
Yeah.
They're local, they're great shops. They have been very hospitable and interested. So of course we're gonna do that. Yeah, I would say why not, right? So if you own a comic shop in New England, and we can make the planets align to get myself and maybe a couple of the contributors there, we'd love to. Massachusetts is sort of our home base, right? The Red King's Boston based, and I'm Massachusetts based. So if it's in Mass, we'll probably go. Anything outside of Mass, I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't at least consider it.
Sure.
New Hampshire, Connecticut, anything close-ish, right?
Yeah.
If we could make the planets line, we would give it a go for sure. Why not? It's a fun day. It's a great way to get the book out, advocate for the book. It's a project that I'm proud of, that I believe in.
Mhm.
And the best way to get it out and to have it make an impact is to get in front of people, I think, and get it in their hands.
Awesome. And I was wondering if you talk a little bit more about Red King, maybe past projects, or is this one of their first like bigger ambition ones, or
Yeah,
a
sure.
little bit?
So I had zero to do with making the film and
Mhm.
everything to do with making the comic. Right.
Gotcha.
So for me, there's a very clear delineation. Now, I've been in the rooms and I know the guys really well, and I've read the script and I've seen rough cuts and et cetera, et cetera. But I had literally zero to do with the making of the film. So they basically are a Boston-based production company, and this is their first feature film. So The Shade was initially a short film
Mhm.
that toured the circuit, right? The festivals,
Yeah.
and it won a million awards. And basically, based on the success of the short film, they wanted to turn it into a feature film, and that's like so much easier said than done. So it's actually like a Herculean effort. I don't The fact that they were able to make a movie outside of Hollywood and get it into theaters is wild. It's like it's borderline fictional, right? Like, so my editor Keith, who I mentioned, he says it takes a series of small miracles to make a comic book, right? And he's right. You have to pull so many rabbits out of your hat to get funding, to get it out to the crowd, to have it resonate with an audience, to maybe make another one. It takes infinitely more miracles to make a movie, right? Because there's so many more zeros involved. Like, it's such a bigger project to make a movie with oh my god, like unions and permits and locations and agents and cast and crew. So watching those guys like work their magic was humbling. And so this was their first feature film. And I think they ideally, right? We make more to make more, right? So if the movie finds an audience and the comic finds an audience, then you're rewarded with the opportunity to make more of both. So that's the hope, right? So they got a uh 300 plus theater theatrical run across the
That's
country.
awesome.
Yeah, it was something. And then so that was huge. And then now it'll go to video on demand on November 22nd. It'll be available on all streaming platforms. You can just, Fandango, whatever, all just search it, you'll find it. So that's the big push right now is 11/22 is VOD, video on demand. And so first it hit the festival scene, and then it hit the theaters, and now it's going video on demand and international, and eventually it will go to tangible, to DVD, Blu-ray, whatever. So yeah, if the movie finds a large enough audience and the comic finds a large enough audience, the reward for doing more is doing more. So luckily, those guys are brilliant and they work their asses off and they don't take no for an answer and they're uber driven. So Tyler Chipman, I think I just said his first name just because I just wasn't thinking as conversationally. Tyler Chipman is the director, writer, and Dave Purdy is the producer, writer, and they're sort of the dynamic duo that is at the front of this thing, pushing the movie. And then from there, there's a handful of us that are sort of in and out of the trenches with them, manning our respective ships. And mine is the comic. So it's been fun. Like it's been a huge learning opportunity. And then as the sort of the creative director for the publishing division, there was a whole host of things that weren't drawing scary monsters, right? That were on my plate. That contracts and event coordinating and virtual meetings and brainstorming and logos and team building and asset deliverables and production and all this stuff. But it was all exciting and some of it was new, some of it I had done. But it was a really cool opportunity to like sharpen some tools in the toolbox and grow as a creative director and art director. And then they just get it. When we debuted the film, they did a cast and crew local, just for like the warm hug, like we made it
Yeah.
to the finish line and this thing's done. And they did it in Salem, Mass, which is like the horror
Perfect.
Halloween capital of the world. And we had our own screening at the theater in Salem. They had a couple different screens. It was great. The whole place was for Red King. They had a legitimate red carpet, and I got to bring like basically my whole team there. And as soon as we got there, there's the red carpet, and then flanking the entire red carpet is just the comic book stuff, and it was so cool. So they like blew up large images of the covers and the title pages from the stories,
Awesome.
and they had them all each individually represented. So that's big stuff. Like so much of this is it's it's just a grind, man. It's like everything sounds cooler than it is. And don't get me wrong, it's cool, but like it's also not cool. It's like when you go to so what is cool is working on a comic for a movie for people that get it and being there with people you love in a team you built and friends you believe in to celebrate your artwork that's in support of their artwork that ends up being all of our artwork. And then we get to sit and watch a movie that these guys made together. And then they get to see the book that we made together. And like that's really cool, right? There's so much that isn't cool, not with Red King, just with life as an artist. I have to say, most things with Red King have been pretty cool. um, so it's been actually a really great experience working with these guys. Tyler and Dave, they really get it. They gave me a ton of autonomy, and I think, and I'm the same way. Like I believe in this too. When I'm very collaborative by nature, and if I'm building a team of people I believe in, well, I believe in them. So I'm bringing them on to do what they do. So why get in the way of that, right?
Mhm.
So obviously you go back and forth. Obviously, sometimes you have to make the call. Sometimes you have to switch courses or whatever. But I'm not telling Keith how to edit our book. I'm not telling John how to design our book. I'm collaborating with them, but they win. Like they're the why else would I have them with me,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I think I'm not ever trying to tell those guys how to do their job, and it's a huge feeling of respect and respected when someone brings you in to do a job and they let you do your job. Now, with that comes a lot of responsibility,
Sure.
and you better deliver, right? And so, if you thrive in that kind of environment and you like that sort of challenge, then it's for you. If not, if you need someone to sort of walk you through steps and this is not there's no judgment. Everybody's different. Like I work probably not in the way that a lot of people work, and my results may vary compared to whatever. Everybody's different. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's just about finding the mix of collaborators, right? Like who works with you. So like I always say, like I don't want to work unless I can really learn from them, right? Why would I want to work with someone who brings almost all of the same skills to the table that I do? Because we're redundant, right?
Yeah.
So I think if I drew like a line down a piece of paper, I could list you a lot of things I do really horribly, and I could probably list you a handful of things I do decently, right? And so the idea is to find other people that do all those things exceptionally that I suck at, and then hopefully they suck at the things I'm decent at, right? And so that's the peanut butter chocolate here, right? Like we're trying to make that work. So I think some of my strengths, luckily for me, aren't necessarily super inherent in a bunch of artists. Um, but I'm a caveman and backwards in so many ways. And if I don't have brilliant guys like John and Keith getting my back and making me look good, if I don't have the support of and the leadership of Tyler and Dave, then we don't even get off the ground, right? So my hope is that the people that are working with me feel that same way about me. And they're like, okay, Adam's the guy for this job. Let me do that job. And man, they did. I don't think they just encouraged. Like, I can't even recall really like a single instance where they were much of anything but supportive. But, we were on time, we were on budget. We tried to hire a bunch of killers, and so like the idea is you don't give them an opportunity to question you, right? You just keep coming. You try to make that damn thing as good as you possibly can, and hopefully at the end of the day it works out that way. I mean, they're not all going to be home runs, but when you pull something together and it feels right, and people you work with are proud of it, and you're eager to get it out in the world, not everything is for everyone, but when you at least feel like you belong and you at least feel like it's man in the arena stuff, right? Like if you feel like the book you produced can live on the shelf with any other book, and you're not drinking your own Kool-Aid, and you're not thinking you're the coolest thing ever, and you have a real handle on where you're at, if it just belongs, that's all you can ask for. We're just asking for a chance, right?
Yeah.
Like we're not going to be the Watchmen, we're not going to be Dark Knight Returns, right? But we're also probably not going to be like Freshman Art Project, right? The idea is like we're putting together a professional, legit, a book worth your time and your 10, 15, 20 bucks, what have you. And if we can get there and we get a chance, well, after we make the art, it's not ours anymore anyway. Once the artist makes the art, it goes out in the world. The art belongs to everybody else. So we just got to get it out there. That's the tricky part. Getting it
Absolutely.
out there and still paying your bills, that's actually the tricky part.
Now, we just did a whole top 13 favorite horror movies. I know you're a
We
big
did.
horror fan.
Yeah, yeah.
As a horror fan, what are your favorite parts about the movie? And
Yeah.
what have you been, yeah,
Yeah. So this is I'm gonna okay. So
without
this is gonna
giving
be
away.
no. This is gonna be a super nerdy answer. And just tell me straight if it's too nerdy and you want a different answer, I'll give you a different answer. But for me, I really get excited about like story behind the story, right? So I love pro wrestling because I love the hidden language,
Sure.
the story of how you break in, um, how the dots connect, tricks of the trade, the all of the what's actually happening here behind the show. I have an endless well of interest, curiosity, appreciation for. Um, I don't really need to go see a professional baseball game, but I will gladly go see the minor league game. Every year, my girlfriend and I take a road trip on the 4th of July. We do all the American things we can do, and we focus on fireworks and hot dogs and minor league baseball. And we are not even baseball fans, but we love minor league games. You go, it's $20, you sit behind home plate, you eat nachos out of a helmet, you see a slice of America you might not normally see because it's all these like second cities, and you're in these interesting places that you wouldn't normally get to. And that's my juice. Like outside of comics, I love that sort of traveling America. And so I love going to a minor league game because that dude is probably not going to be playing pro ball. And if he is, that's an interesting story. And how long has he been in the minors? And what's his next step? So that part of that hits the wrestling in the minor league. That's what hits the movie for me. So I'm a little probably too close to it. So like I'm watching it thinking about how the script that I read on the flight translated to the screen, and the music they went with here, and what they thought about editing here, and will they cut this or add that, and knowing Tyler and knowing Dave and knowing the story behind the story, and just marveling at the fact that they did it. Like I've said to both of them, it's like 0.1 of 0.1% of humans on this blue and green marble that did what they did, right? And that's just a fact, right? The movie could be a dumpster fire. The movie could be a Citizen Kane. It's like that's TBD, right? But getting a movie outside of Hollywood onto a screen, getting any movie onto any screen, like think about just the statistics of humanity and how few people are able to achieve that, right?
Yeah.
So for me, like I'm probably a little too close to it to not see all of the humanity and the pieces and the moving and the effort that went into making it. But to answer you in the spirit with which you asked the question, I think it's okay. Are you familiar with the term umami, like when eating? So it's sort of umami is sort of like mouth feel, earthy tone,
Yeah.
texture. It's almost that like sort of abstract. You have a hard time putting your. So for me, it's the umami of this movie. It's the lighting, the pace with which it's filmed, the angles, the shots, how the music overlaps, how it delivers. You feel connected to the characters, right? Um, it it feels so damn real and so damn legit. Like when you go see an independent horror movie, that can mean a lot of things, right? We talked about this, right? Like, I told you that I removed all of the crap movies from my list because it would just be a list of crap movies because I absolutely adore crap movies. So when you go see like a crappy horror movie, you kind of have a bar, you have an idea, right? Or and when you see an independent horror movie, you might have a preconceived notion, right? There's like nothing small about this movie. There's nothing independent feeling about it except for the spirit with which it was executed, right? So it's very independent in that it's outside Hollywood and that it's very grassroots and it's the most independent. But the term independent horror movie carries with it some baggage and stigma. This feels like a big time movie. Like when you're watching, you're just like, man, like they did it, right? Like this is a movie ass movie. This is a real movie. And like that's in turn what I hope people feel about the comic, right? Like when you hear indie comics, that can mean a lot of things too. I think it's indie comics has probably a more favorable connotation than maybe indie horror movie. I don't know, maybe not. But um, when people pick up the comic, I want them to go, man, this is legit. Like this is a real comic. Like, and that's for me, it's all the glue, all the stuff that like holds this experience together of like, man, this is a real cinematic production. This is a real deal movie. That's my favorite part is that it's that kind of umami, that
Yeah.
feeling you get of, oh man, this is impressive. Like they did this and this feels so good. Like there's no nits to pick as far as impact of production, right? Plot, character, story, doesn't deliver it. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Da-da-da. That's for every movie a personal thing. But when you go to a film and it feels like it's been done and done well and done big, I think that's sort of recognizable, regardless of whether it's a Pokemon movie or if it's the pick your classic, Gone with the Wind. If it's done well, it's done well, and then you decide if the movie's for you or not.
Awesome. And this is in regards to both the comic and the movie.
Sure.
When you're reading or watching, sometimes the art's so good in a comic book, but the writing is, or vice versa. In a movie, sometimes there's an awesome character design, awesome cinematography, but say acting, script, whatever, falls flat. With what you've said, since we've been talking, it sounds like this, both the book and the movie, you get the full experience with everything, and you leave it you leave it with all those elements checked off, and it sounds like an awesome cornucopia of what you guys created.
It is, I mean, and again, you have to remove personal preference. Like, for sure, you could pick up our comic and be like, I don't get it. You could pick up our comic and be like, oh, there's no superheroes, or like, oh, this is dark, or it's scary. Right? It's not for you. Cool. That's not even like, I get it. Like, I don't. There's plenty of comics I don't prefer to read. Right? Like, I'm not. Well, it doesn't matter. My comic preferences, but like, there's many. A lot of comic preferences I don't, share with some of my buddies, right? But like, it's the same with the movie. Like, movie might or may not be for you, but like, it's really like, how do I put it? I'm saying like a lot. That's bad. That's a bad verbal tick. I don't think that anybody would leave either the theater or the anthology feeling like they weren't respected as a viewer, and that the people that made the experience weren't wholeheartedly passionate about both. So I think the movie and the comic were both done with the fullest of effort, the fullest of sincerity, and the fullest of intent. And that may or may not hit you. It may work for you for your preferences, but I do think that they're complete experiences, and it both put a strong foot forward to respect the audience, I would say.
Awesome. And going back to the movie, you said streaming on demand, so November 24th?
Second, yeah, 11/22. It'll be everywhere. So hopefully the rest of the world will see it, right? I mean, 300 plus theaters have seen it already across the country, and that was also a fun experience. But it's been a long road. I mean, we had that sort of cast and crew, friends and family opening over a year ago.
Wow.
And then they actually like debuted the film at the Brooklyn Horror Fest, which ran the same weekend as New York Comic Con. And so we debuted the comic a year ago at New York Comic Con, and they debuted the film the same weekend at Brooklyn Horror Fest, which was crazy, right? Like, that's like, when you're putting this together, you're like, what would be the craziest spot to debut this? Like, oh, like at New York Comic Con, like with the Brooklyn Horror Fest on the same weekend, like. But that almost didn't go. That zigged and zagged 100 times. I had a dozen phone calls with, a liaison at New York Comic Con to figure out booths and pricing, and that was a whole another layer, right? And that's just my little sliver, let alone the movie team, the production that all goes into that. So that was a really great weekend, right? And I was saying to Tyler, actually, I think he kind of pokes at me a little bit, because I tend to get a little touchy-feely sentimental with some of the stuff, because I've been at it a while, and like, for me, like, a lot of these experiences are the difference makers, right?
Sure.
Because, like, dude, real talk, nobody cares about me. No one knows who I am. Like, I'm out here just trying to do this damn thing, right? As are so many of us, right? Like, no one's like, I'm gonna see Adam Miller to get Adam Miller's autograph, right? I'm just a guy who's giving it a go and trying to advocate for art and artists I believe in, and make my impact where I can, and all this, right? So you have to make it sustainable, right? And in 2024, you have to be able to eat, sleep, and breathe, or what are you doing? And then aside from that, like, you're gonna have a bunch of victories, and you're gonna have a bunch of losses. So when those little intangibles come in, like the New York weekend, you've got to use that as fuel, and you've got to hold on to that. So, like I said to Tyler, like, no matter what happens, this was before it was in theaters, before anybody said anything or whatever. They can't take this from you. Like, you made a movie, it's debuting in New York City at the Brooklyn Horror Fest. Like, we made a comic book. Jay Lee is downstairs. I get to go take a picture with him. We get to sign our covers together. We are on New York Comic Con, the largest pop culture event in the country, debuting our book. It's in our hands. We're holding it. Like, and that's, I had an amazing weekend with amazing people. And that's what it's about. Like, the memories I had with my production lead, John, and I there representing the book, and the rest of the team. And they had the cosplay element, and we had all this cool merch, and we had this great big booth presentation. And like, that was very cool because there was like 5 or 6 other people involved that were also really on it and really delivering the goods and like with us. And so John and I were sort of like focused on creators and that stuff. And then there was, it was cool because it's not just one guy. There's like a team of people. The actors were coming in to visit, and Tyler and I did a signing, and of course Dave's running around like crazy trying to make everything happen. And then they're over at the Horror Fest, and like, but we never, like, John and I never set foot in Horror Fest. Like, I don't even know what happened over there other than just what I saw. And then once Tyler was there for at the comic show for a little bit, but he was out because he had to go debut his film. So it's like we're kind of running these trains, but it's very much like if the movie doesn't go, nothing goes. So but yeah, it's like, getting to get that New York slice every night.
Yeah.
Waking up early one morning to go for my run in Manhattan with the sun coming up, like, that's wild, right? Like,
Yeah.
never did that before. And like, that's cool, right? Like, eating dim sum at 2 in the morning with one of my best friends, and then running when the sun comes up, like, while shopkeepers are like hosing down the New York sidewalk in the middle of Times Square, like, when one of the only times New York City is quiet-ish. And like, seeing Jay Lee, and having him be supportive and some of that stuff. So all those little intangibles, like, that's that's the cool. You know what I mean? That's the goods right there.
That's awesome. And uh, for for the viewers who maybe came in late, Noah, thanks for coming in. Brook White Comics, appreciate it here. Sean, I know he's been listening, appreciate it, and Chinmo as well. Thanks everyone who's tuned in, who for watching on the rewind, and for all those people who may have come in late or watching on the rewind. Go over again where people can find both the comic. I know you just mentioned you'll be streaming on November 22nd on VOD, but yeah, just one more time where they can find the comic and
Yeah,
talk
sure.
about
So
yeah.
yeah, the if you guys just anybody Googles The Shade, Red King Cinema, The Shade, you can very easily find the trailer. So I definitely suggest you guys go check out the movie trailer. It's pretty intense, and if it doesn't pique your interest, like, nothing will. So if you dig the trailer at all, which I'm quite sure you will, hopefully you'll follow up and grab it with video on demand if you missed it in the theaters. So first, go find the movie trailer and get your eyes on that because it's rad. And then the movie will be streaming on all platforms everywhere, all over the planet, at 11/22, and that's, again, just search that video on demand 11/22. The comic you can pick up at redkingcinema.com. And I think both covers are still available. I don't know, the ratio variance getting pretty low. But you can pick it up there. And if you don't want to order it, you can get it in person with me this weekend. Like I said, we just extended our book tour that we were on in October. And on Saturday, I'll be at Kamikaze Comics in Somerville, Mass. And on Sunday, I'll be at Paper Asylum Comics in Beverly, Mass. And I will be there and most likely a contributor or two. And we're doing a Q&A on Saturday and portfolio reviews on Sunday. And if you don't want to do any of those things, you can send me a DM. I'm at Millerstrations. It's kind of convoluted. It's MILLERSTRATIONS. My last name in illustrations, essentially. So at Millerstrations on Instagram is where I mostly hang out. I am not the most social media inclined, but I am active enough on there. And if you do want a copy and you don't have the means to get to me in person or don't feel like ordering, hit me with a DM and I'll try to figure out a way to get you a comic or bring you one at a show when I'm out there slinging comics or collecting books or whatever it is that we also do when we're not trying to be artists.
And along with the comic, we mentioned this in the last video. Do you want to talk about your other latest creation?
Well, sure, man. Yeah, thanks for asking. So I just wrapped up a fun project with my frequent collaborator, who is also in the Shade comic. His name is Haig DeMargian, and he is over at Blacksmith Press. And he and I, for years now, but more pointedly, the past say 3, 4, 5 years, we've been collaborating on screen prints. So he's a print master. He's like a cool print master. I'm just a print Padawan who kind of like hangs on to his cape and hopes that I get to learn something from him. So we collaborate together a couple times a year on screen prints. And we've been doing some work for Gallery 1988 out in Los Angeles. And our most recent project was a Creature from the Black Lagoon piece titled Cosmic Creature. And the idea was basically, you know, what we really wanted to do was take like a 1970s blacklight poster, like a very Black Sabbath, blacklight, fuzzy, flocked, ridiculous, heavy metal, like high school kid stoner poster, and cross it with Kirby cosmic crackle wackiness. So what we came up with was putting the Creature from the Black Lagoon in space, and so we gave him Cosmic Creature. So we designed this print for Gallery 1988, and thankfully it's done really well for us, and it's found its audience, and that always super gratifying when you make something and hope that it resonates a little bit. There are a few prints left at gallery1988.com. If you just search my name, Adam Miller, you will see that print along with a handful of others that Haig and I have collaborated on. And I think at least one of my paintings is still available there. And then a mixed media piece. Yeah, I didn't talk really at all about what I actually do, about the art I make. But we can maybe sometime towards the end of the year, if you wanted to have the life and times of a no-name artist on your show, we can go over some of the stuff that I've managed to get myself into. But yeah, the tour potentially wraps up with a couple bonus dates this weekend, and the Cosmic Creature print is available in super limited quantities. We actually just shipped out the ones that sold, and I know for a fact they're super limited. So if you do want one, grab them before they're gone, and that's at gallery1988.com.
Awesome. Adam, thank you so much for your time. I was happy to find out more about this project and let other people get it out there for others to find out. If I'd love to have you and some of the other contributors on the show in the future as well, talk more about how the circuit's been going and responses. So I'd definitely love to do that. But once again, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck with everything going on.
And thanks to you, man. Like this is what it's about, right? It's grassroots. It's people meeting people, like-minded folks that dig the same stuff. And it doesn't matter audience size. It doesn't matter like whatever, like we're all in this mess together. Right. And like, dude, I get to talk horror movies and comic books with you. Like there's a lot worse ways we could both be spending a Wednesday night. Right. Absolutely. So like, that's what it's all about, man. So no, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time and your support of this project. And, I will happily connect you with contributors, and I will happily come back, whatever. At the end of the year, if you want me to babble about how I got into art and all the messes that I've managed to make over the past X amount of years, I don't tell anybody how old I am, because ask Sean about that. He'll get a kick out of that. But yeah, no. So I'm happy to come back. And again, thank you for the support and getting our back on this. It means a lot.
It's my pleasure. I love this supporting local creators, and especially if it's horror, that's an added bonus. So this was a blast, guys. Keep in tune with, Adam mentioned his social media, my social media. We'll be blasting this stuff, for many times to come. And as always, thanks to everyone for tuning in, either live or catching on the rewind. Take it easy, everybody.
See ya.
And the awkward end stream.